Okay, so hi folks. Now we'll take a look at how to run Harbor locally on our local development environments. So if you're just willing to contribute to Harbor or need the code up and running on your dev environment, then you can follow along this video. I have published a blog on the same and we'll be walking over the blog and we'll be performing the steps. So before we begin, some hardware power is required for Harbor to run. So these are some recommended configs. You need a processor with at least 4 cores of Intel i7, i5, 10th Gen Plus or AMD equivalent. RAM 8 GB works, but it will take time and you might have to close some of the other applications. And storage, the Docker images need some storage, so having empty space of 40 to 60 GB is recommended. And if your device doesn't have these capabilities, then what you can do is get a cloud VM, or you can use GitHub code spaces or Gitpod, anything that would work for you. So I use a cloud VM on Hetzner. So it is a cheap and powerful offering, and you can use the links provided here to get started with these. And moving on to Harbor, before you set it up, some software requirements are to be fulfilled. So as of this writing and recording on March 30th, the version 2.7.0 is the latest version. So if you just go to the build docs here and then navigate to the version that is latest to you, then you can scroll down here and check out the softwares that are needed for Harbor to run. And moving on, once you have these installed, then speaking of operating system, you need a Linux-based operating system. I tried running it on WSL, but it didn't work. The build would get stuck at a phase, and I even tried to debug it with the maintainers of Harbor, but we couldn't get it up and running on WSL. So a Linux-based is recommended. Even Mac OS works. I haven't tried out Mac OS, but I know people who have set up on macOS. Or you can use virtualization with VMware or VirtualBox, but this would again need some hardware resources, so it's up to you. And after you have these softwares running, just give your Go and Docker installations a check. And now forking and cloning the repository. So just navigate to the repository, the official repository, and create a fork. So I already have a fork created, and the code snippet here is from the contributing.md file. So it is recommended that you give the initial part of this file a read, and then what you have to do is these are two simple commands that you have to run. And once you have run this, then change your directory, navigate to this Go Harbor, and then you have to clone the repository. And while cloning, here specify the URL of your forked repo, and I would recommend to specify the depth as 1, because you don't need the whole code base, and to get it up and running, just with depth 1 it works too. So I'll be walking over cloning the repo and moving on from there. So this is my dev environment, and I'm right now in the Go Harbor repository. And what I'll just type out the command here, and I'll also specify the depth as 1. And yes, I'm using ZSH, so I got the URL autofilled here. So you can either give the URL of the official repository or of your fork. Anything works, and just hit enter, and it will clone the repo. Alright, so now that we have the repo, let's see the folder that is created. So it creates one folder named Harbor, and let's just feed into that. And there is the source code of this. So if you just want to give this source code a lookout, then you you can open this in your favorite code editor. So I'll just open it in VS Code, and we'll take a look at this code. For better visuality, I'll just change the theme to light theme so that it's better visible in the video. So these are all of the necessary like the code base files, and then walking through the blog. Once you have the code, then some prerequisite YAML config is required. So the file is in the make directory. So in the make directory, there is this file harbor.yml.tmpl. So in the code here, there is this file. So this is the configuration file initially required, and this is a sample file. So what you can do is either rename this file or make a copy of this file and then edit the file. So I would recommend making a copy of this file and renaming it the file. So the file name should be harbor.yml. Once you have the correct name to the YAML file, and in here we need to do some configurations. So we need to specify the host name here. So the host name is the domain name Harbor will run. So for me, I'll just give some domain name. So I own this domain of my name, so I can give a subdomain here. It's fine if you don't have a domain, but whatever domain you put here, you just make sure that it is non-conflicting. And then there are these HTTP and HTTPS ports to specify. So since I am on a server VM, my 80 and 443 ports are occupied. So I'll change these ports to some non-conflicting ports. And also the SSL certificate key and certificate path needs to be provided here. So we'll take a look at that section. So once you have done these configs, whatever each individual thing we have to change is mentioned here. And after this config is done, an SSL config needs to be generated. So for generating that, you need OpenSSL installed on your device. If you don't have OpenSSL and you can generate the SSL certificate using some other method, then it's fine too. Only its path and the key path and the certificate path is required. And then here is the command that you can execute. So if you have OpenSSL, then what we have to do now here is what I'll do is I'll navigate to a directory. So I'll make a certificate here. I'll just make it in the Go Harbor folder. It's not necessary that you have to do it in the same directory as I am doing. You just have to provide a path in the YAML config file. So anywhere you generate, it's fine. And then you can just copy this command. So in the command here, you have to change the host name. So whatever domain you put here, just make sure that it is the same as the host name that you provided. And then just copy paste this command, and SSL certificate will be generated. So this generates two files, rootca.crt and the .key file. So the path of these two needs to be specified. So I'll just copy the path here and specify it in the YAML config. And file name is rootca.crt, and it's the same for the key file as well. Alright, so once you have these configs done, you are ready to get Harbor up and running. So I'll just change back to the directory of the source code here. Okay, so to get the code up and running the first time, there is a make file provided here. So you can give the make file a look in the source code. So the make file has a directive install. So if you're running the code for the first time, then you need to do a make install, and it would do all of these operations and get Harbor up and running. So I'll just do that. And you don't need sudo for this, but the configuration that my environment has, I need to execute it as a super user, but it might not be the same for you. So uh, give this a thought whether or not to execute this as a sudo. And then once you run it, I'll just give my password. Alright, so now the build and install process is going on, and this process takes quite a time, quite a while. So for me, it takes more than 25 minutes to run and happen. So based on the hardware capabilities and hardware resources you have, it might take varied time. But if it feels like stuck at one phase or anything, just know that the build is happening, and it will take time, and after a set amount of time, Harbor will be up and running. So I'll pause the video now, and once it's up and running on mine, I'll be back. Alright, so now the install has completed, and you can see that the start complete, and we can visit Harbor now. So what you can do is to visit Harbor is open your browser and then the HTTPS port that you specified. So in my case, the port that I had specified was 2024. So if I just load the port, then Harbor will load, and since the SSL certificate is self-signed, the browser will show a warning. So in case the warning is shown, you can just proceed and accept the risk and continue, and now you have the Harbor dashboard loaded. So, and to log in into the dashboard here, the default password is Harbor12345, and then you can log in and you can access Harbor just like anywhere. So now that you have the local installation of Harbor setup. So yeah, so this is the part, and just keep in mind that you have to go to the HTTPS port that you specified in the YAML config. So whatever HTTPS port that you have given here, it might be the default for you. So you can either try going to the HTTP port or the HTTPS port. If you go to the HTTP port, it will redirect you to the S port, and it will work for you, and I hope that it works. And now if you need to stop Harbor, then you can run the command make down. So let's just take a look at the containers that are created before we do that. So to take a look at my Docker containers, I use Portainer. It is quite a handy tool. So I'll just refresh this, and let's take a look at the images and the containers that are created. So the images that are right now on my system have a size of almost 13.4 GBs, and it might go up and down as you customize Harbor. So keep that in mind. And taking a look at the containers, so there are various containers created. So the multiple components of Harbor, the core, DB, job service, log, portal. So all of these components containers get created, and accordingly they have their images created as well. So if you need to see the logs of some containers as well, then you can do that easily using Portainer. So I would recommend, if you can use this, you can use it, and whatever log statements are there in the code, logs you can see here. And then moving on to stop Harbor, so you can run the sudo make, no, so sudo is for me, just run the make down command, and you can stop the running. So let me just put my password in here and hit Y, and it will stop the running instance. So it will stop all of the containers that were running, and then if you try to access it, then obviously you won't be able to access the web portal. So this gets done fast, but again, depending on your hardware, it might take varying amounts of time. Okay, so now that it has stopped, let me go to the Harbor portal here and try to refresh it, and it cannot be found. So yeah, and then moving on to the next section. So if we make some code changes and we need to check the code changes, then you can run the following command. So this command, so what happens is if you run make install, the command it will clear everything again, and it will build the whole build process will happen again, and it takes quite a while for the command to run. So just changing two lines of code and then waiting 25 minutes to check the changes is quite a bit time. So you can just run this command. So what I'll do now is I'll change some code. I'll be just putting some log statements in the core component. So here in the src there is this core directory, and in this main .go file I'll put out a log statement in the main function. Okay, so in the main function here I'll just put a log info that changes are working. I'll save this, and I'll copy paste this command and I'll execute it. And once you execute the command, so right now in this command I have specified that I need to compile the core. So of the various components that exist, it will only compile the core component and build and start the Harbor. So if you are working on, let's say, some other component like the Harbor DB or Harbor portal, then you might need to specify accordingly the parameters here. And to understand more about the directives available, you can just take a look at the make file. So the make file has all of the directives. So the make file in the project root, uh, there are various options here. So you can just take a look at that, and the command that we just executed, it takes around 2 to 3 minutes for it to execute. So again, depending on your hardware, it might take varying amounts of time, but it is usually faster, and it is less time consuming compared to running the whole make install. So I'll again pause the recording here, and once the changes are live, I'll resume. Okay, so the command execution is completed, and once it's completed, you can see this message, and it has again created all of the necessary containers. So I'll just try loading the portal, and again the portal is loaded, and we put a log statement here in the main file. The changes are working, so I can see in the logs of the core container. So there are various containers created, and the changes that I just did was in the core container. So if I just take a look at the logs, then I can see. So whatever changes you do in your code, you can simply check them out using the command. And that's all. And if you need any more help or got any more queries, then you can join the official CNCF Slack channels for Harbor, and you can also reach out to me on Twitter or any other of my socials. That's all.